understand that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and is eliminated. But those things which proceed out of the mouth come from the heart, and they defile a man. For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murderers, idolaters, fornications, thefts, false witness, blasphemies. These are the things which defile a man, but to eat with unwashed hands does not defile a man.
Be seated, please. Thank you. Great job. This morning we began our lesson dealing with this particular subject, emotions that destroy a good heart. We talked about the importance of keeping our heart the way it ought to be, that just as we need a physical heart to pump the blood around our body, so we need a spiritual heart that's right with God and toward others for us to be able to exist and do even better than that, to thrive in the life that we live before God. We then talked about what happens when our heart hardens, and we gave a description of a hardened kind of heart. We continue that by talking about 3 of the 4 things that will destroy our heart. The first one we talked about this morning, that being lust. Now we talk about pride. What is there about pride that can harden a person's heart to the point that it destroys them? Probably the first thing we think about when we think about pride is superiority. And that's exactly what pride says. I am better than anybody else. In fact, everyone else are under me. They're below me. They're not as important as me. Pride says there's not anybody else. When it comes to any category that you want to think about, I'm number one. It's me, myself, and I. We make a good number. There's not anybody else that knows anything more than what I can know. Pride says I am right all the time. You know, it's hard to be around someone who feels like that they're perfect. Think about it. And unfortunately, there are some people that unfortunately seem at least to think that their way is not just the best way, it's likely the only way, because it's the way that they have chosen. Pride says, I deserve the pat on the back. I deserve the name in the program. I deserve everything, any accolade that I can possibly get. As I was thinking about this passage, or thinking about this point, I thought of Proverbs 16, verse 18. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. In 1 Timothy chapter 3, along with Titus chapter 1, Paul gives, through inspiration, the qualifications of those who would serve as elders and as deacons. Verses 1 through 5, or through 1 through 6 of 1 Timothy 3, he begins the qualifications, both the positive and the negative qualifications of that individual that would be chosen or be asked to be an elder of the church. In verse 6, Paul says this, not a novice, not a beginner, not of an immature individual, lest being puffed up with pride, he fall into the same condemnation as the devil. It's usually thought before man came into the world that there was some kind of battle, and Satan and his legion of angels decided to rise up against God and Michael and Gabriel and God's angels. And it was because of this pride, this ideology that he was far better, far greater, far more superior to anybody, including God, that of course he was cast out of heaven. But I find it interesting that phraseology is used to refer to someone that's going to be a servant of the church, lest being puffed up with pride, he fall into the same condemnation of the devil. The thing about pride is that it's hard to overcome. Because we like to think that there's at least one thing, if not more than one thing, that we do well with. And thus, when we compare ourselves to others, we're always looking at it from the critical position of, I think I'm better than him in this. I think I'm better than him than that. I am reminded of a preacher, I will not mention by name, that years ago had heard about a new work, a church that evidently he was really interested in. And he had the audacity, uninvited, to go in during the week, knocked on the door, asked to come in, went looking around the building at the various works with, I think it was a secretary, that it was seeing him around the various parts of the building. And finally, he turned to the secretary and said, yes, I think I might be worthy to come to this building and work for this congregation. Guess who did not get the job? Him. But that was the way he was, evidently. And I've always wondered, how in the world could anybody, being the kind of servant that we're supposed to be as a minister and as a preacher of the gospel, along with others who work in different works of the church, have that kind of ideology? How do we avoid destroying our heart through pride? And the first one is very simplistic, but I think it happens. It's true. We overcome it by letting go of it. We decide that pride's not going to be a part of our life. We decide that regardless of whatever it is that we have done, it is not that important or as important as we think it might be. Another suggestion: do the work that everyone needs to do without expecting praise for it. You know, there's a lot of people in this congregation that do that very thing. They do the work that they do simply because it needs to get done without ever asking for or demanding or expecting their name to be brought up publicly or put in the bulletin or some other kind of way. And thank you for that. You want to know how to overcome pride? Do a study of the life of Jesus. Do a study of the life of Paul. And you'll find out the opposite of pride. Remember in chapter 13 of John, Jesus gets up even after knowing that Satan's about to go and deny him, and he washes everyone's feet. Now, Peter has a problem with that. And finally, the Lord convinces him, Peter, you're either in or out. Which one is it? Well, Lord, not just my feet need washing, everything about me needs washing. But then the Lord said, you want to know why I did that? As an example. To let you know that I, as the master, have done that for you, so you ought to do that one to the other. To avoid pride, serve. You see, it's usually said that pride was, and I think it really is, it was the first sin that man ever had. Because if you go back to the Garden of Eden, what was there so becoming about that particular fruit? And it wasn't just because it looked desirable. It's Satan there, as it were, enticing the woman. And then the man, hey, look, if you partake of this, you're going to become just like God. Don't you want to be like God? Don't you want to be as wise as they are? When we appreciate all that has been done for us, When we list our blessings of life and name them one by one, as the song suggests, it's amazing, as the song says, what the Lord indeed has done. To avoid destroying your heart, get rid of pride. But then we talk about anger. Now, anger is something that's just natural. It's usually reserved for injustice. That's when particularly we get angry. And it can be productive when we use it in the right way. You know, when Jesus saw what they were doing with the temple, he made a whip of cords, and he went out and drove out those money changers and all those animal keepers because they had turned the house of God into a den of thieves. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26, in your anger do not sin, Paul said, talking about human relationships one with another. But here's where the anger can get really difficult. When it's misdirected, that is, when it's done for the wrong reasons, not the right reasons. The angrier we get, the more violent we are, there's something about it that just makes you feel good. I know that sounds crazy, but unless you've been there, unless you've been that angry that you went in there and just sort of cleaned house, you just went in there, destroyed whatever, that there's something about anger. It just sort of makes you just feel like a real person when you get in there and do the things that you know you shouldn't be doing, but yet you have this idea, I'm doing it for a right reason. I'm doing it because I'm hurt. I'm doing it, and on you can add on to the list. But there's something about anger that just makes you want to feel that way and act that way even more so. And here's the problem. Because we want to be right about our anger, we rationalize it. We justify it. We do anything we can to because you see we're out there righting the wrongs that have been done to us and to others. And therefore it becomes a habit, it becomes an instinct, and it's something that we do without even thinking about it. We just react. Think about that. And we become like Cain, that in a fit of rage, misguided rage, took it out on his innocent brother and killed him. You see, most of the time, psychologically speaking, we get angry and do things at the wrong people. No, we do that. They just happen to be in our way, and we just get out there and we just do all kinds of terrible things because we try to rationalize and justify this ideology that we have. And thus it just becomes a way of life. You know, the Bible says all kinds of stuff about if you know, anything and everything you can do, stay away from an angry man. Why? Because not only will they hurt, but they're just going to get more angry. It's just the way they are. Well, what do you do to avoid it? Again, this is really simplistic. You walk away. Anger produces anger when you got two people involved. But if you only have one, then it just can't continue to boil and mess up and whatever. You see, it thrives on the idea that I'm being abused. Someone's doing me wrong, or someone that I love has been wrong too, and I'm just not going to take it anymore. You ever heard anybody say something like that? I'm so mad, I'm just going to, and then they do whatever it is, or they say whatever they're going to say, or they do whatever they're going to do. But have you ever thought If our Lord had ever reasoned that way, would he ever gone to Calvary? Look at what was done to him. Look at all the things that he had to endure. All the injustices done to him. All the slanderous things. All the accusations that were not true. Look at the way they treated him. And if he had reasoned the way that many of us reason when it comes to our anger, he never would have thought about Calvary. If you really want to deal with anger, take a vacation from social media. Why? Why? If you ever been on social media, you know why. I mean, there's so much stuff out there. There's so much junk out there that people thrive on and people, take sides on, political or otherwise, that it can just ruin your day if you allow it to. Occasionally around the holidays, I have friends that will say, I am taking a vacation from social media to be with my family. You folks take care. I really admire people like that. Now, as far as I know, they do that because I don't ever notice anything about their post or anything for a couple of weeks. I bet they have a wonderful time with their family. If you want to get rid of anger, think about some alone time. Do something to exercise both your body and your mind. Go somewhere and find a happy place, either psychologically, physically, or otherwise, and find out what joy and peace and contentment are all about. I'm serious. Think about that. And it may be literally not only unplugging your phone and unplugging social media, but it may be that you got to get away from certain people that just thrive on drama of one kind or the other. We may never ever totally get rid of anger, but we sure can control it better with God's help and with other people's help. Because you see, at the end of the day, if I do not control anger, anger will control me. And it will destroy our hearts. But then one more, and I realize that we can make this list much longer than it is. But another emotion that can destroy a heart fit for the service of God is self-pity. Why will self-pity destroy a person's heart? And the answer is, it's because of what self-pity does to each one of us, if we choose it to do so. It allows us to waller, to head downward to the quicksand of pittiness, of feeling like I am the only person that has ever been hurt in my entire life, and therefore, for that reason, everybody's wrong but me. You ever met someone like that? It's easy. It is really easy to have a pity party. It's very easy to feel like that no one loves us, that no one cares for us, that all the terrible things of life have treated me terribly. You see, self-pity leads to depression. That mentions everything that's been done toward me, or someone that I love. That's wrong with them. It goes back it's connected to that anger part. Everybody's done this toward me or toward someone else. And therefore we begin to get historical about all the injustices, all the comments, all the things, all the attitudes, all the this or that and the other that we want to list that have been done to cause me to feel justified in the way that I'm feeling at this point in time, and that's self-pityness. So we get into a state of depression, we get into a state of despondency, we get into a state of who cares about anything or me in every kind of way. And eventually, likely, it leads to what we call the blame game. And I'll go ahead and tell you, the first thing about self-pity is this. We typically don't look at ourselves as to why we're in the state that we're in. We have our guns a-blazing at everybody else that has caused that regard. We look at our parents, we look at our neighbors, we look at our friends, we look at our church folks, we look at our people at work. I mean, think about all the shootings that we've had in our country recently where, disgruntled employees went to their workstations to do harm or to kill and murder. Why do they feel that way? Because of what's been done to them, they feel justified. And when I'm able to blame everybody else around me but me, then I don't have to evaluate. The problem may be with me. So that's why when it comes to self-pity, you have sometimes very volatile issues that are being done because someone reaches a point of self-pity to the point that they want to just look at everybody else because it's a whole lot easier than having to look ourselves in the mirror and to play that kind of game. And self-pity is real. It's not just real to those folks who have lost loved ones or lost situations of life or other kind of thing. It's real to every one of us. Brian and I a few weeks ago did a study of Judas and Peter, I guess we'd call it. And I've been in conversation with someone since then, and Brian, we're going to probably have to come back and do part number 2 because there's still a lot of things that we've left undone. But one thing I noticed, the difference between Judas and Peter, because both of them had denied the Lord, that you read something about Peter that's rather unusual, and I think says something about his character. Chapter 21, Peter says in verse 3 to a bunch of the apostles, I am going fishing. They said to him, we're going with you also. They went out and immediately got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. You're saying, what's the big deal about that? What's that got to do with self-pity? Judas, in his self-pity, killed himself. Peter, in his self-pity, said, okay, I'm tired of feeling sorry for myself. Let's go do something like fishing. And it's not ever bad to go fishing, I don't guess. But the point was he was ready to change where he was to at least get out among the crowd. Self-pity is conquered when we choose to do good toward others. Now, in this regard, in John chapter 21, I don't think Peter had any idea at all that the Lord was going to be coming around and talking to him about the conversation that they had. But you solve self-pity by being a servant. And you say, well, I don't feel like being good toward anybody else. Well, that's part of the problem. But you can change that, just like we can change anything else about our life, to the most part, when we're willing to realize that we still have good that we can do to others. Share what you have with others. Go out of your way to become a person of importance to someone else. How many times have many of us, gone to situations when we felt tremendously bad about the situation we were going into because of the pain and the agony they were feeling? But yet we went in and visited with them, and we spent time with them, and maybe we served them in some kind of way. Didn't we feel better when we got out? Far better than even going in? Yes, because we served others. Again, give yourself to the church without any expectations. Like Jesus Christ, think about the interest of others, as Paul said in Philippians chapter 2 and Ephesians chapter 2, and as Jesus did over and over again. Lust and self-pity and anger and the idea of pride, they will destroy our hearts. But they don't have to. Because if we're willing to use those things that we've talked about to make ourselves better for this year, not only will we be a better person ourselves, but we'll also be a better person for God and for this church, for this congregation. From time to time, we need to do a heart check to be sure that we're where we are with God, that we want to be. Again, going back to Jesus Christ, of everyone in this entire world, he had the right to feel the way that we've just talked about today, yet he chose not to be. Because he knew that the world needed him. Well, the world needs you as well. It needs all of us to be all that we can possibly be. You've listened well. If you need to respond to the Lord's invitation, we invite you to come right now as we stand and sing together.